obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. And blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Chronic happiness. What in the heck is she doing to us now? Sounds like an ailment, I know. In fact, the word chronic can be defined as a condition that is persistent and long-lasting. I'm sure if I polled you folks, there'll be people here who've had chronic back pain, chronic joint pain, chronic headaches, chronic mother-in-law. Right?
That's right.
Well, I say, if we can have all those things, why can't we have chronic happiness? And we can. But imagine, if you will, going into the doctor's office and he says, ma'am, we have the results of your blood test. But let me ask you a few clarifying questions just to confirm our suspicions, okay? Number one, do you have a silver lining compulsion? Are you prone to generating long lists of gratitude? Not sounding good. Do you have problems with being overly compassionate to those you meet? Do your family members often complain that you habitually look for every little thing they do right to find you too kind for your own good? I know that's Grace. Grace, you are not faring well on this quiz.
Oh,
the doctor's getting very concerned by this one. Do you have that awkward tendency of surrendering your problems and your cares to the God within? Ma'am, I'm so sorry to inform you, you might be suffering from what is chronically known, what is commonly known as chronic happiness. Now, isn't that the type of doctor visit you want? To go in there and not to be told you have some large, looming, chronic disease, but instead, you are suffering with chronic happiness. Well, I say, regardless of the shape you have walked in here with today, that we all are meant to have a good old case of chronic happiness. And hopefully this talk, if you will allow it, will show you how to develop that, and why we even care to have it. I think it'll even show us the fact that we all have very different definitions of the word happy. So let's explore this a little bit further, shall we? How can we even talk about chronic happiness if we don't have a common understanding of this powerful concept? Let's try a little test, shall we? Let me run these questions by you as I give this talk. Ponder this for yourselves. Let's see where we're all at. Is pleasure happiness? Is happiness pleasure? People are nodding, yes. Is joy happiness? Is happiness joy? Is prosperity happiness? What about excitement or peace or zeal or laughter or fun? Are those happy? Are those types of happiness? Does it change based on your genes or your upbringing or your locale or your happiness set point? And we all have one of those. And the good news is we can all impact it. We can all change that. If you're in the middle of turmoil or intense grief or even despair, does that mean you cannot maintain happiness? What do you think? If you ask most people what it is they want most out of life, and in fact, we just saw the movie Called Happy at Rhode Island Center for Metaphysics down in East Greenwich. Where I'm the spiritual director. They opened the movie after I wrote this, and it proved my case. What do you want out of life? What is the thing you want out of life most? To be happy. The American dream. The pursuit of happiness. But what does that mean? What does that mean? For the purposes of this talk, I offer the following definition of the type of happiness I am referring to here today, and the power yielded by achieving that. The definition is as follows. An overriding sense of well-being regardless of the circumstances in your life. An overriding sense of well-being regardless of the circumstances. How many would have defined happiness different than that? One person listening. What do I have to do?
I'm making it a sure.
That was my idea, the soft shoe, by the way. That was pretty bad. You okay? Okay. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong at all. Earlier in the year, I laid out some goals for myself. That's not unusual since coming into the New Thought movement. For the past 10 or 15 years, it's something I do. But what was unusual, as I do this out of a meditative state, because I like to let God lead me as opposed to the general way that I go through life, unfortunately, is letting Claude lead me. But you know, that's neither here nor there for the moment. One of the things I jotted down was this term chronic happiness. And it's not something I'd ever remembered hearing before. What is chronic happiness? But I put it down, and I always put down a date, you know, when I would like to achieve this. It's a helpful exercise that I've done for a number of years. I decided to take the lead from Mother Teresa, who when asked, Mother Teresa, will you come to march against war? She said, no, I won't. But when you have a march for peace, call me, and I'll be there. I wanted to stop fighting the chronic pain. And those of you who know me know that I suffered with quite the bout of depression this year in the most unlikely of circumstances. Many of you have prayed for me, and I thank you for that. So instead of fighting that, I wanted to embrace chronic happiness. Why put my energies on fighting this thing? I wanted to be on this side of it. This talk will show us some of the tangible things we can each do to create a life of chronic happiness regardless of the circumstances you are in, or you will be in. Because we all go through those bumps and dark nights of the soul. Really, that doesn't matter. Really, that doesn't matter. We don't have the time to focus on all the possible suggestions. I did research for this particular topic for a long time because it's one that's very close to my heart. I invite you to add more. I'm going to talk about 6, right? 6 that hit me. I invite you to add more as you feel moved to. Okay, so the first principle to achieve chronic happiness is it's a choice, man. It's a choice. Abraham Lincoln is quoted as saying, most folks are as happy as they make up their minds to be. We have the power each day to choose what to focus on and how to interpret our reality. We know what we focus on is what we tend to see more of and get more of. And this happens even in the face of challenging feelings and circumstances. I think of how those in the World War II concentration camps, how were they able to get through? And we know some famous ones like Viktor Frankl wrote Man's Search for Meaning. What must they have been focusing on during those deplorable times? Same for the slaves in our country. We hear, you might have caught the Ancestry.com commercial where they said, you know, my great-great-grandfather started out a slave. He was born into slavery. And by the time slavery was abolished, he was a businessman, right? How does that happen? How does that happen when you're so oppressed and the only thing you know is to be held captive? How do we make such a radical transition? I need to emphasize that in my experience, this choice of happiness takes persistence and it takes muscle, mind muscle. Like everything else we're taught in Unity. It's here. It takes compassion for ourselves. It takes practice. It takes picking ourselves up and trying again and again and again until the habit and the focus is where it belongs, on what is good, what is useful, and what is positive. We can train ourselves to chronically look for the good, to chronically and persistently look for the good in others and other situations. The choice is ours. We can challenge ourselves and we can come out on the other end of this and have that life of chronic happiness. So the first principle to achieving chronic happiness and maintaining it is it's a choice. It is a choice we make day by day, incident by incident, minute by minute. The second principle, happiness is a byproduct of living well. Aristotle told us, and he's the first one to kind of coin this whole term of happiness, but this is his definition. Happiness is achieved from living well and doing well. Living well and doing well. Sounds kind of simplistic, but let's explore it. He made a distinction between what feels good, what might yield us pleasure. I like chocolate ice cream. You know, the darndest thing earlier in the year, I have an allergic reaction to ice cream. I can't eat it anymore. It's just wrong. It's just wrong. But think about the sensation you get, the anticipation of eating the ice cream. How long does that pleasure last? How long? Till about when the cone is done, right? It's not like I think about 3 years ago, I had the most unbelievable ice cream cone, let me tell you about it. The distinction between that and the happiness yielded from going on vacation, say, with the ones you love, and seeing that majestic sunrise or the sunset or the ocean. We might have pictures of that. Anybody ever take a picture of chocolate ice cream? But these things, that's kind of the distinction. If you want to know the difference between pleasure, which tends not to be very long-lasting, and happiness, which has the opportunity to be chronic and persistent, that's the difference. That's what Aristotle's talking about here. The Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh explains that we can use mindfulness to help us achieve this type of happiness. Another way to live right and do right. Live in the moment. Right? We hear that all the time. He says, regardless of our internal weather, we can return to our breath and anchor our mind. Happiness is all about mind training. It's all about mind training. To understand a famous roadmap for what living right looks like, we need to look no further than Jesus' teaching in the Sermon on the Mount. I read some of the Beatitudes for my scripture reading out of Matthew 5 today, right? Some say this is Jesus' greatest work or his greatest lesson. Joan Chittister, who's one of my new favorite authors, she's a nun from Erie, Pennsylvania. She wrote a book called Happiness, which was one of the sources that I researched. I highly recommend the book from Joan Chittister. It was amongst the best. It's called Happiness. She said blessed is another word for happiness, right? So blessed or happy are the poor in spirit, those who are filled by the things of the spirit and not necessarily the material world. Blessed are the peacemakers, or the gentle, or the merciful, or the pure in heart. So what is Jesus teaching us? You want to be happy? How much mercy have you shown today? Are you generating peace? Now notice this. When I was in depression, depression is a disease of the me, the I, the my, right? Me, I don't feel good. I can't do it. Things are going to get worse. And then the anxiety and the depression would do a dance. But all the stuff that we speak about today, or a number of the things, and we're going to get to another principle that really speaks about this, is other-directed. Is other-directed. It's directed at another person. It's not about me. What have I done for someone else today? Have I tried to walk in peace? Have I been merciful? Have I been pure in heart? These are all things that will impact other people in a good way, right? The focus is really not on me. Each one of us could make it our life's work to just focus on one of these things. Pick one of these things to increase your mercy or your compassion, to become more gentle. Think about it. If we were to allow ourselves to be fixated on a more gentle walk through life and all the things that we do, what would that do? I tell you what, the level of happiness in our life, for one, there'd be a lot of byproducts, but this would definitely be one, would increase, would absolutely increase. So how do we show up in the world minute by minute, hour by hour, incident by incident? Do you ask yourself this? Like at night, how did I do today? How did I show up? Am I meeting my own personal goals? Maybe these aren't your goals. Maybe you will decide after this talk that you'd like some of these to be your goals. I don't know. It's up to you. Do we show mercy, forgiveness to ourselves and others? Are we honest, sincere? Do we live a life of integrity? Do we create peace? Are we gentle? Do we focus on the beauty around us? Do we slow down to notice God's great designs? This is another way to live right, be in the moment. So I walk in Johnston Park pretty regularly, and I really was practicing mindfulness, and my eye hit one of the leaves on the trees. And I started to look very closely at that leaf and its magnificent detail and design. You know, usually I just freight train past it. It's like, let me get this walk over, let me do 2 miles so I can go on to the next thing. But not today. Not on this day. It was a nice, cool day. The breeze was moving the leaf. And I tell you, just by focusing in on that leaf for just a few seconds, taking the time to slow down and look at God's magnificent handiwork, put me in a completely different state. I was calm. I was radiating what we're describing to be this chronic happiness. So the second principle, living well and doing well. The third principle, and we started to talk about this a bit in the other principle, is how we treat others. Happiness is generated by how we treat others and our focus on service and compassion. Compassion and a positive attitude, as well as connectedness towards others, may be the one thing within